In this presentation, we will take a look at the statement of financial position within our not-for-profit problem in QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Desktop. Here we are in our practice problem. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view drop-down and selecting the open windows list. We're first going to take a look at Excel to see what our objective will be. So here we are in our Excel problem. We're concentrating here on the statement of financial position. That's going to be down in cell T33. Now you'll note that the financial statements will typically be created from the adjusted trial balance. We created 3 adjusted trial balances as we've gone through this problem. The first is where we entered all of our transactions into. We had the adjusted trial balance, and then we had the expenses here by their nature, meaning typical type of expense categories. We then copied those ending balances down to the beginning balances here and created another trial balance to transfer those expense accounts from their natural categories to what they're used for, the function of or the use of those expenses. This is the trial balance that we would be using then to create in general the financial statements. Then the third financial statement or the third trial balance we had, we took those ending balances and put them in the beginning balances so that we can do the closing process. The main point here is the breakout between the net assets, between the net assets with restrictions and without restrictions. So considering the statement of financial position, we're typically going to be taking it from that second trial balance, the numbers. Now, the statement of financial position, of course, is basically a balance sheet. So we have the assets, we have the liabilities, and we have not the equity, but the net assets, and that's going to be the major difference that we see here. If we pull over the numbers, we're pulling over the numbers in a similar fashion. We're pulling over the asset accounts. It looks much the same. Then we have the total assets. We're pulling over the liability accounts. We have the total liabilities. And then we have the net assets. Now, remember, the net assets, like the equity, is pretty much the same thing for any type of organization in that it's assets minus liabilities, or kind of the net value of the organization. If it's a sole proprietorship, then it would be stockholder. It would be the sole proprietor's equity or capital account. If it was a partnership, we'd have 2 capital accounts for the 2 partners. If it's a corporation, we would have common stock and other kind of equity accounts related to a corporation. So here with the not-for-profit, we're going to call it net assets rather than equity. And we're going to have to break them out. The thing that's going to be different or more difficult is we're going to have to break them out between those without donor restrictions and those with donor restrictions. This is important because when we think about the organization, they're going to want to know this is the net assets, basically what they can spend. Assets minus liabilities. They're going to start planning out where they're going to want to spend this money. And we need to let them know that there's going to be a portion of that they want to spend that has restrictions on it. And that's going to restrict what kind of plans are going to be made for it. So that's going to be one of the major things that we need to do. One of the major differences that we have. Then the total assets and the liabilities, of course, match up. The total liabilities and net assets match up to the total assets, and that's in essence the balance sheet. Now let's see what it looks like in QuickBooks. So if we go back over to QuickBooks then, and we go to the reports drop down, we're going to go to the company and financial. We're going to take a look at the balance sheet standard. Balance sheet standard, we're going to change the date up top to 12/31/20, and then I'll change the font size, going to the customize, and then I'm going to go to the fonts and numbers. We're going to change the font size. We'll make the font size number 11. And then I'm going to say okay, yes, and okay. So here we have it. Now the first difference, of course, is that we have the balance sheet labeled as the balance sheet. If we want to change that, we can do so. We can simply say, I'm going to call it and rename it the statement of financial position. I'm just going to copy this so I don't have to type it in there and possibly misspell something, or very likely. And then go back up, and I'm going to go to the Customize Reports, the top left. We're going to go to the header and footer, and then we're going to change the balance sheet to the Statement of Financial Position. So that's the first change we can make, and we can then label it in the proper labeling there. Now the major categories here on the balance sheet is going to be the assets. I'm minimizing so that we have just the bottom line number. Assets, liabilities, and equity. Now, of course, this equity section is the main difference we're going to have here, because we wouldn't want to call it equity. We would want to call it net position. But QuickBooks, because it uses equity as the name of an account type, we can't really change the equity portion. So it's going to be called equity. However, the accounts within the equity section, we can then change to suit our needs. Okay, then within the assets, we're going to have a very similar setup that we would expect. Within QuickBooks, on the normal kind of balance sheet, it is breaking out between the current assets and the long-term assets. We have a bit more subcategorization, but in essence, the assets are fairly straightforward for the balance sheet and the statement of financial position. Then we have the liabilities, again, fairly straightforward, breaking out between current liabilities and long-term, but in essence, liabilities being liabilities, fairly straightforward there. Then we have the difference being the equity down here. Equity, again, called equity because that's the account type. So the account type is set up as equity. We can't really change that name to net position. However, the accounts within them, we can then label temporary or unrestricted. Now, we did change the name because we do have some limitations in terms of how long the name should be, and these are going to be the default names that were provided to us as we created the QuickBooks file, and we used the names that was created when we created the not-for-profit organization. So we kept those names. You can change the names, however, you're going to be limited to how long the name could be. Then we have this kind of issue here. We got net income. Why is there net income on the balance sheet? That's unusual. That shouldn't really be there. QuickBooks puts it there because QuickBooks is trying to help us to see that that ties out to the profit and loss statement. So they're kind of trying to say, hey, look, the balance sheet's tied out to the profit and loss statement. Here's how it's tied out. There's the net income. It's a problem for us because we don't really want to see the net income. We want to see that rolled into the proper equity account, whether it be restricted or not restricted. And so that's going to be an issue for us. So let's think about that first. Let's think about how that does tie into the profit and loss statement. So if we go to the reports up top, we go to the company and financial, and we take a look at the profit and loss. We want to take a look at the profit and loss, let's say by class. And then we'll change the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. Changing the font size by customizing the reports up top, going to the fonts and numbers, changing that font to number 11 and OK, yes and OK. Then I'm gonna minimize this so we see our 2 columns and then the 3 columns here for the total at the end, and we have the total being the net income of the $278,900. Again, the bottom line number, it's saying net income. We'll talk about that. That's not going to be the term that would typically be used in the not-for-profit, but same kind of idea. That's the revenue minus the expenses in essence. That number then, that $278,900, is what QuickBooks puts on back to the balance sheet in the open windows, the balance sheet in the equity section. So that's how it ties out. Again, we're going to say, well, that's nice, QuickBooks, but I would like it to be rolled out, because what I really want to show my readers when we go to the board of directors, we want to say, hey, look, this is what the net assets are, and here's it broken out between the restricted and unrestricted items. So QuickBooks will actually do the closing process for us, as we saw in a prior presentation. If I just basically go to the first day of the next period, it'll roll over. So in other words, if I make this as of January 1st, this net income will roll over once we refresh it, and there we have it. Now it's actually properly allocated, and it looks good. We would like this to be as of December 31st, however, and run this report. So this bottom line, in other words, is correct. The breakout is correct. The rollover happened properly now, and we don't have that net income kind of problem, but we have the wrong date. So in other words, there's 2 ways we can deal with this kind of problem with this net income and how we're going to print this report. I want to print this report to the board of the directors, but there's just net income in there. Well, one thing we can do is say, hey, why don't we put it on January 1st, and then I can actually change the date here. So I could actually go into the date and say I want to customize the date and go to the header and footer, and then say, rather than as of December 1st, we're going to make this rather than as of January, December 31st. So we could change the date like so, and then say okay, and there we have that. Now, this wouldn't work if there were any transactions that happened on that one day on the 1st of the next year. So then then it would be distorted by the activity that happened on that day. So you couldn't have any activity on the first day if you were going to use this method of the next time period. Or you can actually go to the prior time period and print this out in the prior time period, and then export this to Excel, and then format it within Excel as it should properly be. So those are kind of the 2 methods you could do to deal with this issue on how we're going to deal with this item on the bottom. Now, if you're going to be using this repeatedly for not-for-profit organization, you would probably want to memorize this report so you don't have to change the name up top all the time. So you would then probably want to go to Memorize Reports and then memorize it. You can create a custom area to put this report if you so choose. So you can put your memorized reports all in one area and then say, okay. Save this and memorize. Let's put it in a group. It's currently in the accounting group. Again, you can make a group, in other words, your own group if you want to. It's under accounting right now. So I'm going to say, okay. And now that report is memorized. Now, as we print these reports, we're going to think about how we would display these reports to basically a board of directors. So we might want to display this report. We might want to display it this way. We can print it this way. And we can export it to Excel. I'm going to export it to Excel as well, and then show you how we can put the documents in Excel and make one document from Excel with all of our reports on it. So we'll do this not all in this presentation, but we'll do this as we go through the reports that we'll be looking over. So I'm going to go ahead and let's go to make this as of the first day of January again. So now our equities looks good. Now I'm going to export this to Excel. We're not going to give it to someone in Excel, but Excel will allow us to then generate one PDF file with all of our reports in it. So it's a useful tool to have. So I'm going to go to the Excel dropdown. We're going to then say we want to export and create a new worksheet. We want a new worksheet. Create a new worksheet, and then we're going to export in a new workbook. So the workbook is the Excel file. The worksheet is the sheet within the Excel file. We're going to export that. So here we have it. Now I'm going to do some standard kind of formatting we would have within Excel. Typically there's going to be a split screen when we export it. So I'm going to go over to this view tab down below. It's called the page layout view. I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to say OK. Gives us a better idea of the split screen that we have there. Then I'm going to go up to the view tab to remove it. View tab, Windows Group. And then select split to remove those split panes. So there we have that. Then I would typically go back to the normal view. So back to the normal view, there we have it. Then I'm going to rename this tab so I know it's a balance sheet. I'm going to double click on it to name it. And then I'm just going to call it BS for balance sheet. And then I'm going to go to the first tab and I'm going to remove it. I'm going to go to the first tab here. It always adds this tab, so I'm just going to delete it. I don't need it. I'm going to put my cursor right on the tab at the bottom. Left click at it or right click at it, and then delete that tab. It's going to say, hey, it's permanent deleted if you do it, and we're going to say, yeah, that's okay. That's what we want, permanently delete that one, and there we have it. Now, this is useful because this is something we can print this at, and we can create other tabs with it with the rest of the financial statements. Now, you're probably not going to give someone an Excel sheet, but the other thing you can do with this is print all of these on one PDF file in this format. How? You can go to the File tab. You can go to print down below, and then once there's more than one worksheet, what we'll do is print the entire workbook. And then we're going to print it not to a printer, but to a Qt PDF printer, a PDF printer in essence. This PDF printer is free, so if you wanted to look up, search on the internet, whatever browser you want to use, the Qt PDF writer is something that you should be able to download for free. And once you do that, then you can then print something to that Qt PDF writer, and it'll, in essence, just make a PDF file of it. Really useful tool to have. So that's one way, that's what we'll do once we create all of our financial statements. For now, we're just going to save this Excel worksheet. So I'm going to go to the File tab, going to go to the Save As. We're going to browse. And then I'm going to look for my folder over here. I put it into Not for Profit. It's on the desktop. It's a little bit messy on the desktop these days. That's okay. And then we're in the Problem 1 docs. That's where I'm going to put it. I'm going to call this the Financial Statements. And then I'll save that there. So next time we're going to actually export to this workbook. So I'm going to save that. We're going to close this back out. Now you can also, of course, print this report out as a PDF file. You can print it up top, or you could save it as a PDF file. And then some reports, like charts, might not have that PDF saving option, in which case you could use that Qt PDF printer again. So anything that doesn't have a save as PDF but has a printing option to it, you could say, I want to go to that report and print it. then once again use that cute PDF printer writer. So this is the other option we have. We can then preview it or print it. I'm going to go ahead and print it here. And that then will say, where do we want to put it? I'm going to put it to the same location. It's going to be problem 1 docs. And I'll put this, and I'll just call it the balance sheet. So balance sheet, actually I should call it the statement. Let's just say statement of financial position. And notice once we save this, it's going to save them one at a time. So save. So the two methods we have here, if I save all the financial statements one at a time and I email it to someone or something like that, I have to put however many attachments I need, like 5 attachments for all the reports. Or we put it into Excel, make one PDF file with all of them, and then we can export that one PDF file, which is a pretty nice tool to have. It could be kind of impressive to have to people. And again, putting the reports together, displaying them to the board of directors in a readable way, especially to some some people may not really be familiar with financial statements. So the presentation of it is really, a part of the most impressive part of it. So you want to kind of batch it together in a way that looks nice, that people can open it nicely, that everything's formatted well, and that's going to be, half the presentation for financial statements oftentimes. If you can get it all on one PDF file with one attachment instead of 5 or a zipped file, then it could be a little bit nicer to deal with for those who you're giving this information to.